My family recently discovered that I am wealthy, and now they are demanding that I fund a $35,000 vacation for them. This, despite the fact that I have already paid off all of their mortgages. To give some context, I am a 45-year-old woman, happily married with 3 children. A decade ago, my life changed drastically when I came into a significant amount of money. I had spent years working hard in a highly lucrative field, making smart investments that eventually paid off beyond my wildest dreams. Over the years, my wealth has continued to grow, steadily. My husband, who has always been incredibly supportive, considers this money mine to do with as I please, even though we do not have a prenuptial agreement. Therefore, I will speak as though this wealth is solely mine to manage. When the first major influx of money came in, my husband and I followed through on a plan we had often discussed in the past: what we would do if we ever came into significant wealth. The first thing we did was pay off our own mortgage. I bought a new car, and we purchased a beautiful home in our favorite vacation destination. Since we don't use the house year-round, we rent it out to a wonderful family who takes good care of it. Additionally, we set up college funds for all 3 of our children, ensuring that each fund contained enough to cover 5 years of education. If any money remains after their studies, they can use it as a down payment on their first home or apartment. As the money continued to flow in, thanks to my work and investments, I turned my attention to helping my immediate family. My husband has 2 sisters, and one of them has 5 children. On my side, my brother has 2 kids of his own. In the spirit of fairness, my husband and I decided to set up college funds for all of our nieces and nephews, ensuring that they would each receive the same amount as our own children. We put strict stipulations in place to make sure the money was used appropriately. My eldest niece had already started college, so I reimbursed her parents for the tuition they had paid thus far. Fortunately, she completed her degree in 4 years, and even had some leftover money to start her adult life. Wanting to extend my financial support further, I consulted with my accountant, who also happens to be a dear friend, to determine how best to assist my brother and one of my sisters-in-law with their mortgages. Ultimately, I paid off the majority of both. Since my parents already owned their home outright, I instead treated them to a luxurious vacation. As for my in-laws and my other sister-in-law, they were renting their homes, so I covered a substantial portion of their rent to help ease their financial burdens and allow them to save. I also donated a portion of my wealth to charitable causes, both locally and abroad. In addition, I funded college savings accounts for the children of our closest friends, wanting to share the blessings of my good fortune. As a special treat, my husband and I organized an all-expenses-paid vacation for both sides of our extended family, covering the costs ourselves, or rather, myself. At that point, everyone seemed genuinely grateful for the generosity. However, one particular sister-in-law, who always craves attention for herself or her children, started displaying a different attitude. While she remains polite to my face, I have come to learn that she frequently badmouths me behind my back. She makes passive-aggressive comments about my success, my work, and even my character, but always in a way that makes it difficult to call her out without appearing petty. Over the years, I've perfected a strategy for dealing with her behavior. I play the innocent, oblivious role and pick apart her words in a way that forces her to back down. This approach has helped me shut down her snide remarks many times without giving her the opportunity to paint me as the villain. For the past few years, this sister-in-law has been dropping increasingly unsubtle hints that I should pay for a lavish, all-inclusive vacation abroad for her and her family. She justifies this request by pointing out that I can afford it. However, she and her husband already have substantial savings, much of which was originally intended for their children's college funds. That money has remained largely untouched. Then, the pandemic hit. During that time, she fell silent about the vacation request, as she and her husband took the situation very seriously and refrained from traveling. Now that most restrictions have been lifted, she has resumed her old habits. Recently, she hosted a joint birthday party for herself and her son. Since her son had expressed a strong desire for a birthday celebration, we attended and brought gifts for both of them. The birthday boy received a gift voucher to purchase camping gear of his choice, while my sister-in-law received a separate voucher that she could use however she pleased. To make it even more special, I also included sunscreen, drinks, and other travel essentials, knowing that she had mentioned wanting to take a vacation. Or so we thought. What happened next took us completely by surprise. She turned to me, looked me dead in the eye, and asked, "So, what are our..." As we discussed our holiday plans, we made it clear that we wouldn't be crossing any foreign borders this year. Instead, we had booked a cozy cabin within our home country for a week. A charming, comfortable place, but nothing extravagant. It wasn't a luxurious retreat. We would still have to cook our own meals and do the grocery shopping. Upon hearing this, my sister-in-law responded with her usual, overly sweet, "Oh, how nice," routine, followed by the predictable, "We're still thinking about what we want to do." My husband and I exchanged a glance. We both had a feeling about what she was hinting at, but we chose to feign ignorance and started throwing out alternative ideas in hopes of steering the conversation away from disaster. We suggested that perhaps they could visit some extended family and stay with them for a weekend. Or maybe a camping trip? There was a campsite with plenty of entertainment for kids of all ages. We tried everything to keep the conversation light and non-committal. And then it happened. She pulled out her phone and eagerly showed us something she had found on the internet. To be fair, the place looked amazing. Not overly luxurious, but certainly high-end. An all-inclusive resort with a water park for the kids, a spa, a wellness center, and all the bells and whistles. It seemed like the perfect vacation for a family with young children. But then we saw the price tag. $35,000 for a family of 7. My husband, ever the diplomat, raised his eyebrows and said, "Wow, that's a lot, but hey, it's great that you've saved up so much for this." He was genuinely impressed, thinking they had been setting money aside for this dream vacation. That was when my sister-in-law dropped the bombshell. "Oh, we didn't save for Anna, we thought you'd be paying as my birthday gift." Silence. Absolute silence. We all just sat there, completely stunned. Did she really just say that? No, scratch that. Did she really just expect me to gift her a $35,000 vacation just because I had the money? She continued, completely unfazed, launching into an explanation of how I make more than enough, how we're family, how she had already promised our godson and the other nieces and nephews that this vacation would happen. Her voice was sickly sweet, as if she were making a perfectly reasonable request. Meanwhile, even her own children looked up from what they were doing, waiting to see how we would respond. My husband, bless his soul, simply burst out laughing. He thought she was joking. My father-in-law, on the other hand, just sat there, observing, while I, in my state of shock, did what could only be described as an excellent impression of a fish, mouth opening and closing wordlessly. But my sister-in-law was dead serious. "You have the money, you can just give it to us, you won't even miss it." This is the same woman who has made her disdain for me and my career painfully clear over the years. Always in her trademark passive-aggressive way, always careful enough that calling her out would make me seem petty. My husband has confronted her about it. Even my father-in-law has. And yet, here she was, shamelessly demanding a fortune from me as if it were her right. I sat there, watching as she widened her eyes in that faux innocent way she always does when she wants something. She kept listing reasons why I should just give her the money, as though she were reciting a script she had rehearsed. Never once did she acknowledge the generous birthday gift voucher I had already given her. Then, finally, I snapped back to reality and said the one sentence she absolutely did not want to hear. "But you have the money." She blinked, taken aback. "I have the money. That's true. So you can pay for it," I said, matter-of-factly. She brightened instantly. "Oh, that's great. But I won't." The smile on her face froze. But, we deserve it, you won't even miss it. We're family." I nodded. "Yep, unfortunately, you and I are family. Now, I love being family with your kids, however." I paused before continuing in an even tone. "Fact, we are indeed family. Fact, we all deserve a nice vacation after the nightmare that was COVID. False. I wouldn't miss that $35,000. I'd definitely notice it missing from my bank account." I intended that last part as a joke, but she was in no mood for humor. She and my brother-in-law immediately launched into a rant about how much money I had, how unfair it was that I wasn't willing to share, how I was being selfish for keeping it all to myself. That's when I finally laid it all out. "Listen, you have made it abundantly clear that you do not respect me. You do not respect my work. You do not respect the fact that I worked hard and sacrificed to build this wealth. You do not respect that I have already paid off your mortgage, covered your children's college education, and even given them money to help secure their own homes. Instead, You badmouth me, insult me, and have even told people that my husband should divorce me." My sister-in-law immediately began protesting, frantically trying to deny it, while my brother-in-law called me a liar. That was when my father-in-law finally spoke up on my side. To my shock, her own children chimed in as well. They had overheard their mother saying terrible things about me on multiple occasions. And then, the final blow came, the birthday boy. Her own son revealed that he had accidentally recorded one of her conversations while filming a TikTok video. Without hesitation, he pulled up the footage and showed it to us all. My brother-in-law went completely silent. My sister-in-law, realizing the tide had turned against her, finally stopped pushing for the expensive vacation. But instead of apologizing, she crossed her arms and pouted. "Fine," she huffed. "If they're not paying for this holiday, then..." At the very least, my sister-in-law insisted I should cover the cost of their plane tickets and allow them to stay at my holiday home. She tried to make it sound like a reasonable compromise. She conveniently forgot, however, that my favorite vacation property is currently rented out to a local family, something I had mentioned many times before. Due to the ongoing impact of COVID, that family has no choice but to remain there, as they either cannot or are too afraid to travel. I shut her down immediately. Not happening. First of all, that family cannot leave. Second, you don't get to make demands. The voucher you received has a very generous amount of money on it, more than enough for you to put toward a vacation of your choice. Third, we already took you on a vacation paid entirely by us, so you've already had an all-expenses-paid trip. And fourth, if you want more money, then get a better-paying job. You have a degree. Use it. Then I hit her with the final truth. And lastly, you treat me like garbage, yet you still have the audacity to expect me to hand over my hard-earned money? That's when the waterworks began. She turned to her father, expecting sympathy, but to her shock, he completely sided with me. He told her that he understood my stance and acknowledged the immense amount of hard work and sacrifice my husband and I had put in to earn this money. My husband, on the other hand, was furious. His temper flared, and I could see the rage simmering behind his eyes. He made it crystal clear to his sister that this conversation was over. "This is never going to happen," he said firmly. "How dare you even ask?" With that, we packed up our kids and left. Later that evening, we got a phone call. It was my mother-in-law. Now, she has a history of enabling bad behavior, and since this particular sister-in-law is her favorite, I wasn't surprised when she tried the usual guilt trip routine. She reminded us of how hard things had been for them before I came into money. She went on and on about how much my financial help had meant to the family, subtly implying that maybe I could just be a little more understanding. But my husband wasn't having any of it. He handled her perfectly. After a long and frank conversation, she finally backed down and understood our position. Then, the funniest thing happened. My sister-in-law's own kids turned against her. They were absolutely furious that she had pulled such a shameless stunt. They knew we had a great relationship, and they were genuinely afraid that her actions might ruin it. When they managed to come by for a visit, we had a heartfelt conversation. I reassured them that we didn't hold them accountable for their parents' behavior. I explained why we weren't handing out money like that beyond the initial gifts we had given. They listened carefully, and while the youngest still took their parents' side, the older ones completely understood. They knew about the generous college and home funds we had already set up for them. I made it clear that we never wanted them to go against their parents. We knew they still had to live under that roof. They stayed for dinner, and then, after a long night of talking, they went home. Since then, the dynamic in their household has shifted dramatically. The kids barely talk to their parents anymore. They still do their chores, they still inform them of important things. But that's it. They've emotionally checked out. To make matters worse for my sister-in-law, she had also gone behind our backs and rallied other family members to her side, sending messages and making calls, hoping to stir up support. She wanted an army of flying monkeys to pressure us into giving in. But her plan backfired spectacularly. Her own son, the birthday boy, shut it down with a single Facebook post. He uploaded the video he had recorded of her badmouthing me, exposing her hypocrisy to the entire family. The backlash was immediate. Relatives who had initially supported her turned against her and my brother-in-law. The flood of angry messages she received was relentless. They were uninvited from certain family events, We even received apologies from some of the flying monkeys who had initially taken her side. Many admitted they had struggled to pick sides because they understood both perspectives, but after seeing the truth for themselves, they wanted no part in defending her. The only thing that still bothers me is the position this has put my in-laws in. My mother-in-law in particular is struggling. She is incredibly family-oriented, and now she's caught in the middle of this mess. Now, I know some people will ask, why not just give her the money and avoid the drama? Here's my answer. 1, because of the way she has always treated me, even before I had money. 2, because I am simply not comfortable with the idea of handing out large sums of money beyond what I have already given. And finally, because I refuse to reward entitlement. Now, here's where the story takes an even crazier turn. My sister-in-law was livid that I refused to cave to her demands. The drama she stirred up wasn't enough for her. So, she did something unthinkable. She let the entire extended family in on just how much money I actually have. She called relatives left and right, ranting and raving about how unfair it was that I had funded college tuition for some of my cousins' kids and paid for a past family vacation. And, as expected, once certain people found out about my wealth, they started whispering among themselves. A few days after our fallout, I received an unexpected call from an aunt and uncle, relatives who never usually reached out. I put my phone on speaker while folding laundry, and at first the conversation was casual. They asked how we were doing, how we were holding up during COVID, we exchanged experiences, shared small talk, and then, out of nowhere, they hit me with it. Listen, we heard. The phone call started innocently enough, but it quickly spiraled into something I hadn't anticipated. We heard you have some college funds set up for certain cousins' children. Is this true? They asked. Yes, that's true, I replied without hesitation. I'm no liar. Is it also true that you took your mother-in-law, father-in-law, sister-in-law, and her family on holiday with you? Yes, I confirmed. And you have a vacation home as well? Yes, we do, I said cautiously. But why exactly do you need to know all of this? We never knew you had so much money, they exclaimed. I sighed. Well, it took years of hard work, sacrifices, dedication, and, I'll admit, a bit of luck. That's when they dropped their bombshell. Haha, well, since you have all this money, you need to pay for our grandchildren's college funds too, and we want to go on a family holiday with our children as well. We deserve it just as much as everyone else. For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. The sheer audacity left me in silence. We're family, they continued, so you have to pay. Still in disbelief, I barely had time to process what they were saying before they went even further. Yes, we want college funds for each of our 6 grandchildren. $800,000 per child. And, while we're at it, we'd like a vacation home like yours, but in a different location. We've already picked one out and we'll send you the details soon. Oh, and of course, we also want an all-expenses-paid family holiday. You have the money, so you can pay for all of this, right? At that moment, I was beyond angry. I was utterly speechless. As they continued to ramble about how they deserved all of this because we were family, my husband, who had been quietly listening from the other room, was growing more and more furious. I had the presence of mind to press the record button on my phone midway through the conversation, and then calmly ask them to repeat their demands. Once they had finished, I took a deep breath and finally spoke. Are you done? I asked. When they confirmed they had nothing more to say, I made it crystal clear. This is not going to happen. You may think you're entitled to my money, but you're not. Then, I hit them with the same phrase that many of them had thrown at us when my husband and I had been struggling financially years ago. Back then, we had faced a health crisis and found ourselves in a tight spot. Desperate, we had reached out to family, asking if we could borrow some money, with a promise to pay it back. Out of 9 aunts and uncles, only 3 had stepped up to help us, and we had repaid every single cent. The rest? They had refused us outright, telling us, it's your responsibility to have and save enough money for the care, well-being, and education of your family. If you can't, then you don't deserve them. So I threw their own words right back at them. It is your responsibility to have and save enough money for the care, well-being, and education of your family. If you can't, then you don't deserve them. We will not be giving you any money. On the other end of the line, there was nothing but stunned silence. I told them to pass the message along to the rest of the family and to never call us with such demands again. Then, I hung up. My husband, who had been listening the entire time, was beyond proud of me. But the drama didn't end there. Over the following weeks, more aunts, uncles, and cousins started calling with the same entitled requests. Some tried to guilt trip us, others tried to demand, and a few even tried to sweet-talk their way into financial favors. Only the 3 aunts and uncles who had helped us in our time of need remained supportive. They told us to stand our ground and reassured us that we didn't owe anyone anything. Then, one cousin called with a different kind of request. He wasn't asking for a handout, he wanted a certified loan. He and his wife had saved almost enough for a down payment on a house, but they were just $1,000 short. If they could secure the full amount now, they would be able to purchase the house immediately, rather than having to wait months to save the remaining sum. This was a request I was willing to consider. I agreed to the loan under strict conditions, ensuring everything was properly documented and notarized. Just today, I saw that they had already sent back the first half of the repayment. Of course, that small loan set off another firestorm within the family. The entitled aunts, uncles, and cousins were furious. They couldn't believe I had loaned money to one cousin while refusing to shower them with gifts. Things escalated to the point where we had to arrange a family Zoom call. I laid everything out clearly. I am more than willing to help when someone genuinely needs financial support, but it will always be under legal contract so that neither party feels cheated. No handouts, no entitlements. If you need help, you can ask, but it will be a loan and you will be expected to pay it back. One of my cousins, the one who had borrowed the money, even showed the notarized loan agreement as proof. Most of the family members seemed to understand, even if they weren't entirely happy about it, but for some, it still wasn't enough. Then came the final straw. Last week, I arrived home on a weekday to find something I never expected: a full-blown family ambush. There were cars parked up and down the street, far more than usual. It wasn't a busy day, yet I counted between 15 to 20 aunts, uncles, and cousins gathered in front of my house. So much for social distancing. I had to drive past my own home and park elsewhere just to avoid the chaos. When I finally stepped out of the car and made my way back toward my house, I was already on high alert. I may be generous, but one thing that a few people in my family seem to forget is this: you do not mess with me. And for those who don't know, let's just say my right hook is something to be feared. But rather than engage with them directly, I pulled out my phone, dialed the non-emergency police line, and kept walking. This wasn't just about money anymore, this was harassment, and I was done playing their games. Realizing that things were about to escalate, I called the police station and explained the situation. I told them that tensions were high and that there was a strong chance things might spiral out of control. They assured me that officers would be dispatched to assist if necessary. As soon as I stepped inside my own property, all hell broke loose. The moment they saw me, my so-called family, erupted into chaos. They started screaming, cursing, and issuing threats, telling me in no uncertain terms that I needed to pay up or else they would make sure I paid one way or another. They cornered me. I stood my ground, refusing to let fear dictate my response, but the situation grew more hostile by the second. Some of them jabbed their fingers aggressively in my direction, some inches from my face, others actually pressing against my chest and arms. I told them, multiple times, to back off and leave, but they ignored me, their entitlement blinding them to the fact that they were outright assaulting me in my own home. Thankfully, during this madness, some of my neighbors had also called the police, concerned by the sheer volume of screaming coming from my property. More officers were on their way. And then everything escalated in the worst possible way. One of my uncles, a towering man, at least 6'3", made a colossal mistake. He slapped me. This grown man, nearly a foot taller than me, slapped me across the face, with full force, right in front of the arriving police officers. The world went silent. I could feel the sting, the heat radiating from my cheek as he loomed over me, shoving his face close to mine and ranting about how I needed to obey him as one of the elders of the family. His voice dripped with arrogance, and as he raised his hand again, fully intending to strike me a second time, I reacted on pure instinct. I knocked him to the ground. He wasn't unconscious, but he was stunned, completely rattled that I had punched him back. That was the moment the spell broke. The police officers sprang into action, forcing my family away from me. The shock of seeing their so-called elder flat on the ground had stunned the crowd into temporary silence. Some of them, realizing the situation had turned against them, made a run for their cars and sped off. But it was too late. Those who remained were met with some very angry law enforcement officers. Fines were issued for breaking social distancing regulations, and they were informed that they should fully expect charges to be pressed against them. As for me, I was mostly fine. A few bruised fingers from the punch, but nothing serious. My uncle, on the other hand, walked away with a broken cheekbone. And the best part? My security cameras had caught everything. The footage was now in the hands of the district attorney. In the days that followed, the fallout was massive. Other relatives distanced themselves from the whole situation, wanting nothing to do with the chaos that had unfolded. But despite everything, I couldn't shake the guilt. I felt like I had somehow divided the family simply because I refused to hand out my money. My husband, however, refused to let me dwell on that thought. "You worked hard for this money," he reminded me. "You get to decide what happens with it, no one else." Even so, I found myself contemplating setting up college funds for the rest of the children. But deep down, I knew that doing so might send the wrong message, that I could be bullied into submission with enough harassment, violence, and threats. And I was so sick of it. Was I the jerk for refusing to cave in? It seems like, far too often, when someone comes into a large sum of money, whether through inheritance, career success, or sheer luck, their closest relationships start to crumble. In this case, it's even more shocking, because I had already gone above and beyond for my family. I had a clear, structured, and fair plan in place, a plan that should have been bulletproof. How could anyone possibly complain when their mortgage had been paid off, their children's college tuition fully covered, and their kids even given money for a future down payment on a home? I had even ensured fairness by reimbursing the parents of a niece who had already been in college when these funds were set up. I had meticulously planned every detail to make sure no one was left out. And yet, despite all of that, my sister-in-law still badmouthed me. She had the audacity to demand a $35,000 vacation for 7 people without even including me. She expected me to pay for a luxury holiday that I wasn't even invited to. Maybe in her mind this was normal because I had already paid off mortgages and taken the family on a previous vacation. Maybe she saw that as a precedent. But honestly, it was madness. So now I ask you, if you were in my shoes, if you suddenly came into a substantial amount of money, how would you handle it? Would you share your wealth with your family? And if so, how would you prevent a situation like this from unfolding? Let me know your thoughts below. Was I the jerk for refusing to give in, or was I simply standing my ground? The biggest lesson I've learned is that money reveals people's true nature. No matter how much you give, some will always demand more. Generosity should come from the heart, not from guilt or obligation. Set boundaries. Family does not mean entitlement. Those who respect you won't measure your worth by how much you give them. Saying no will bring backlash, but true relationships won't be ruined over money. Wealth should be a tool, not a burden. Help wisely, but never let yourself be bullied into giving. Respect is worth more than money, and I have no regrets standing my ground. Neither should you.